Everyone, and welcome to the Department of Medicine, Geriatric Medicine Grand Rounds. Before I introduce our speaker, I have a few housekeeping items. This CME activity is jointly provided by the Queen's Medical Center and the UH Jabson Department of Geriatric Medicine. At this time, please enter the name and credentials of everyone viewing these grand rounds for CME attendance purposes. As a reminder, evaluations are required for CME. You can find the evaluation by following the link in the chat at the end of this talk, or on our email advertisement, or on our website. Every year we send out CMEs, our sponsor sends out CMEs in mid-January. Your comments are very important to the planning committee and will be used to plan future programs. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Poki'i Balaz. She is a public health executive leader who has dedicated her career to advancing health initiatives through innovative strategies in healthcare policy and system change. Her work focuses on aging and advocating for underserved and aging populations. As a Native Hawaiian and geriatric nurse practitioner, she has firsthand experience in how cultural approaches to caregiving can significantly improve health outcomes. She has been a caregiver to her father, who has Alzheimer's disease, and to her nephew, who is autistic. She uses these personal experiences to inform her professional work. She has provided consulting services and guidance to numerous organizations over the last decade, identifying inefficiencies and tailoring solutions to meet their unique needs. On the national level, she has contributed to the Native Hawaiian Advisory Council and the Policy Advisory Board for Elderly Affairs, advocating for legislation to protect the aging population. She's a board member of the Alzheimer's Association Leadership Board, receiving the Advocate of the Year award. She also has many honors. She's been named to Pacific Business News 40 Under 40 and Hawaii Business Magazine's 20 for the Next 20. She has earned a Certificate of Honor from the Hawaii State Legislature. Notably, she's the first person from Hawaii to be selected for the Obama Foundation Scholars Program. She holds a doctorate in nursing practice from the University of Hawaii at Hilo and an executive MBA from Scheidler College of Business at UH. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Poki'i Balaz.
Thank you, Dr. Masaki, and thank you, everybody. It's great to be here with all of you and the opportunity to join everyone. And thank you for making the time. I think this is lunchtime for many of you, so I appreciate it. I'm going to, Justin, CJ, is it okay to start sharing my slides? Just to make sure.
Yes, okay. Please go ahead.
Okay. All right, can everybody see that? All right, so today we're just going to talk a little bit about cultural perspectives in aging, a little bit about what I guess I've gone through over the years and how a journey that started out in healthcare. I did not think that I would end up doing work in policy, but it definitely was a blessing, and I'm appreciative of the work. All right, so some of the things that we're going to be going through today is just explaining and comparing cultural perceptions, analyzing policies or aging policies and challenges, really looking at cultural competence, which I'm sure everybody here is very familiar with and well versed in and probably have had, but how that it can in fact affect or integrate into policy, improving care coordination and quality of life. And the pictures I chose for this one, that's my grandmother, who I'm named after, and my parents. And as Dr. Masaki referred to, my father is in the end stages now on hospice care, end stage of Alzheimer's. And the reason is for Native Hawaiians, right, a lot of who I am is a culmination of all those who came before me. So a lot of what I do isn't, to highlight me or my words, but it really goes to the people who came before me, who set the path, who led the way, and not just 2 generations back, but we feel that we are a culmination of all of those who came before us and for those who are going to be coming after us. And they are the reasons that I do what I do, and the inspiration why I continue to go forth. Today we're really going to be looking at the creating effective inclusive aging policies and respect and accommodate the diverse needs of the population, because as the global population ages, the demand for policies that support the well-being and quality of older adults, it is increasing, as we all know, here in Hawaii, across the nation, and across the globe. And so we really want to look at the respect and how do we accommodate this the diverse needs of this elderly population, as well as the demand for the global policies. So cultural competence and cultural policy, like sometimes, how do they interchange? And so these are my own words. These are pulled from Santa Barbara, but they do, I thought, a great way of kind of pulling them together. So cultural linguistic competence is a set of congruent behaviors, it's attitudes, it's the policies that come together in a system, right? Or an agency or professionals that really enable this effective work in cross-cultural situations. And then they further define what culture is and the competence. So integrating, right, this pattern of human behavior and the competence that implies they have the capacity to function effectively. And we definitely see this in Hawaii, not just in Native Hawaiian culture, but across the many NHPI or AA, NHPI diversity that we have across the state. And it's always interesting to see. So while I'm here in Hawaii and we, kind of have this like really melting pot of Asia and the Pacific, and then when I'm in New York, I see a totally different melting pot of just so many cultures from around the world coming together and integrating into the health systems and into the different organizations that are trying to serve them. And it's really just wonderful to see everybody coming together to try to pull together to support so many diverse people. So aging policy, and this is really from the Health and Aging Policy program that I'm a pleasure to know my colleagues in this program. It's out in DC, but they really look at aging policy in a broad context. And it's policies that really improve the whole well-being of older adults. And we focus a lot sometimes in healthcare and our chronic conditions and looking at policies, which is very much needed to change the health status of those that we're serving. But when we're looking at the whole person, we're also thinking about their economic stability. For me, I spend a lot of my work now looking at caregiver financial viability because caregivers have a difficult time sustaining themselves financially as they've gone through this caregiver journey for 10, 20 or plus years. We're looking at the physical security, right? We do look at the vulnerable, the underserved populations, and then really promoting civic engagement. And so it's really taking a look at how can we, in a sense, do this wraparound through policy work to change things at a macro level to affect many. So some of the aging policy issues that have come forth over the years, again, this is from HEPF, this is how they've been able to integrate aging policy into many of these issues. I won't go through the entire slide, but as you can see, from the ACA to CMS and to everything in between, aging policy really does become part of it. And it really is advocating, through policies, through this cultural lens. And when I also think of policy, I don't think of aging policy as an aging issue. So many people, maybe sometimes have the lens that, oh, no, that's an aging issue. That's for people that are, who are at that certain age. But really, when I reflect back on aging policy, it's really an us issue, right? It's not an aging issue. It's an everyone's issue. All of us are going to be, at some point, part of all of these issues. And so I think it's an entire generation that for those of us that are working in this space, trying to create a change that will make a difference for the generations behind us to come, but also to create change for those of us who will one day be needing the Older Americans Act or becoming part of Medicare and Medicaid. Like, we need to make the changes now to change for the future later. And so some of the importance in healthcare really is looking at, enhancing the patient care for us providers, ensuring that healthcare providers are meeting the diverse needs of the patient, improving patient outcomes. We want to really look at how our communication efforts are going, what people are saying, what the community is saying, what we're hearing, and fostering that trust between patients and providers, which is especially important in the Native Hawaiian culture, to foster that trust, to have that talk story, that rapport part, and then to promote this inclusivity by respecting and valuing the cultural backgrounds of all patients. And a lot of times when I'm looking at things through a cultural lens with agent policy, it's not necessarily that the policy needs to state something for Native Hawaiians, but it's that what am I bringing from what I know about my culture, my people, what's important to us, and then how can I take that and bring that into the space and make sure that that is part of what we're creating, that it's acknowledged, that it's heard, that it's not just heard and then disregarded, but heard and to become part of the intent of the policy that we're is. And this isn't just policy on a national level or state level. This is policies within organization. This is when we're looking at policies, we're developing programs and outreach, when we're developing our research studies. All of those things need to be taken into consideration, even in the policies that we make in clinic, the way that the providers are interacting with different diverse populations. And sometimes when we're in Hawaii, it's almost assumed that all of us know each other and how to interact with all these different cultures and that we're well versed and we know it, but it's not true. And I think a lot of us still have, some of our own learning to do. And while I'm at Kukuaklihi Valley, I always appreciate my colleagues to come in and teach me and give me a hint, because I'm not always well versed in some of the cultures that I see. And so for this crowd, I'm sure that many of you are very well versed in our Native Hawaiian health disparities. We know that we have a lot of chronic conditions and diabetes, hypertension, among many others. Even Alzheimer's rates are increasing. Our cultural barriers, a lot of times, especially with our elder population, our kupuna population, can be due to language, a lot of trust issues. And it's one thing when you're working with diverse populations, it's one thing to take a class, which is great, or get some training, or talk to somebody who has knowledge in that space. But also reading up on the history. History dictates a lot of what is happening now in our present space. And so understanding the history of the Native Hawaiian people, of how we have come to be at where we're at, why we're dealing with these chronic conditions, not just that Native Hawaiian elders and Native Hawaiians in general have these chronic conditions and they're at higher rates, but why? It's not always because the patient is just non-compliant. It's not. There's so many factors, and unfortunately, historical trauma plays a huge role and a huge part in why our population is at where it's at. And we have, come a long way, and we have so many success stories to share, and then yet we still have work to do. And so we're relying together as a community to work together to do this so that we can continue to uplift the people. Native Hawaiian culture and aging. All of these slides, I will say, they're not an exhaustive list. They're just a few points, because when you learn how to do PowerPoints, or you don't crowd the PowerPoint. So it's just to make a few points. But when we're looking at our culture, many other cultures, it's acknowledging that Native Hawaiians already have a real rich cultural heritage. That we have some prominent points that many times get pulled out, like Ohana family, our community, or at other times many people hear us say the Lahui, our nation, and our kupuna, the elders, and really honing in and understanding that the kupuna really hold more than our wisdom and experience. Sometimes it's really hard to translate into English the meaning or the essence of the word that we are trying to express. And so kupuna, it doesn't just mean an older person. We're really talking about this person, this vessel, this entity that has all of our downloaded knowledge and ike and mana'o of all these generations that came before us, that they're holding that. They're the keepers that are passing it down to us. For instance, when I was born, because I was named after my father's mother, very Hawaiian style, I was hanai'd by her. And that was so that she would raise me and that I would get all the intergenerational download and then go back to my parents. And so that was one of the things that she did. And she was a traditional healer and a cultural practitioner and a native speaker. And from her, I learned my first introduction into Native Hawaiian spaces. And then from my parents, really how to do this delicate balance of going in between these two worlds, as we say, and to be able to prosper and thrive on both ends. And it's very much to acknowledge too that in our culture we had a healthcare system, not had, we have. And so that and I think that that sometimes gets missed when we come into the clinic. Many of us are Western trained, so am I, and that's fine. But really, how do we bring them two together? When we have La'au Pa'au, we do have medicine that we've used for centuries to treat ourselves. My grandmother used it, my mother's grandfather, and so these things should be acknowledged and should be part of not only policy making but healthcare. We had Lomi Lomi, right? Our way of massage, our Ho'oponopono, and other things that we did to really help our lohui to thrive. And those things are still present today. And these are things that come up when we're talking about policy, when we're talking about licensure, when we're talking about practicing. And we do have La'au practitioners, we have Lomi Lomi practitioners, Ho'oponopono, and these are just a few. So that's my kumu, Keoki Bakla'an. I am a haumana for La'au Lapa'au. And he is just an amazing person, and many times consults on many things that when we're bringing the two cultures together. And then of course we have Kilo Chan and also others like Lena Ala who are doing Lomi Lomi, and then of course Auntie Lynette, who is very well known for Ho'oponopono. I'm sure many of you know her. And so my father and mother, even Dr. Mao, were part of Lua with them. And so that was my first introduction to the Hawaiian fighting arts, which, as they say, if you learn how to harm, then you must learn how to heal. And so both are taught and shared at that time. And so some of the challenges, especially a lot of these contribute to the Native Hawaiian elders, is really looking at, where are they located? Many times they're in rural areas. And so all of this that we're going through, it may sound very much like a healthcare presentation, but these are all things that we're considering when we're drafting policy, when we're writing policy. For instance, when we're writing a policy on how, on if funds are going to be going to a car service program to pick up kupuna in rural areas, right? So then we have to get the information on where they're located, why they're not able to get to where they need to go, what are the barriers, what are the challenges, what is the population we're looking at, and so all of this information, just like research, healthcare can really inform policy to help us develop policy that's really going to make a difference in people's lives. And so what are the financial challenges they had? For instance, the Kupuna Caregiver Program was made to help alleviate that, the first in the nation to ever come about, yay for Hawaii. And that was really looking at how can we help those who are caregivers who needed help financially continue to work and continue to caregive and to feel okay about leaving their loved one and be able to have that option. And so financial challenges such as those really help to inform policy. The chronic conditions that we're well versed in, any contributing factors that are happening to the population we're looking at language and trust issues. That's going to keep coming up a lot. And I know it can seem like, yes, you've said that, but really establishing the trust is key really to doing things, especially with the Native Hawaiian population. I mean, history, it's a long history that has equated out to a lot of mistrust in this present day. And so we're at the forefront when we're meeting with patients. So how do we then mihi that and reestablish that trust, that partnership? And looking at preferences for traditional cultural practices are very much wanted. And have been, just like the Hawaiian Renaissance in the 1970s, have surfaced, are being taught. Many students are wanting to learn more about it, many Native Hawaiians and others. And so it is with understanding that it's not really a challenge, but it's really accepting that traditional cultural practices are here, have been here, will stay here. And now how do we bring that forth so that we can improve the quality of life and health for those that we're serving? And the respect for that. Many of my colleagues, many of us, are very interested in learning different modalities. But there are times when people may feel that their traditional beliefs and ways are not respected. that it must be one way. And it's not always in that way, respecting the history, respecting their needs, their wants. How did their family practice things? Or not everybody who's Native Hawaiian practices the same. There were different ways of teaching, different ways of learning. Not everybody has the same thought. Not everybody speaks Hawaiian. Not everybody grew up the same. So even within our own culture, right, there's a diverse population of how people feel about many of these things, about the lahui, about healthcare. And so, it's really trying to get to know everybody individually also. And then, of course, understanding our very long and complicated history. So some of the innovative approaches that have become or have started in healthcare, really integrating the traditional healing practices, right? JAPSOM has the Department of Native Hawaiian Health, the nursing school, UHM has Ike Hono, and so there's a lot of things that are happening, and also in our healthcare systems. So want to really focus on programs that incorporate cultural practices and promote holistic health. Looking at some of the success stories, our legislative efforts. There's a lot of efforts that presently are bringing many Native Hawaiians into focus, but it started a long time ago with the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, with the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Improvement Act. We have been doing policy and working alongside for many, many years and continuing to do that. We also have a diet. Our culture, we had a diet that many people know, the Waianae diet, and how successful that was, but we have Aipono and food that we regard as important in being healthy. And some of them that I can share is, I remember I went to see a nutritionist, the time this is years ago, and didn't have a fully understanding of poi. And so her recommendation to me was to take that out of my diet. And I absolutely was not going to take that out of my diet unless, of course, there was like going to be an adverse reaction. But she just felt that she wasn't ma'a with it or understood it, or even understood the history behind it with haloa and connection to it as a Native Hawaiian. And so I never saw her again, because I did explain to her what it meant. I didn't just and tried to have a dialogue, but unfortunately she felt that it wasn't important for me to continue to eat, and so I did not return, because I didn't feel that she respected my culture or my understanding of what kalo means to me. And in La'aula Pa'al, food is medicine, so it also has properties to help in healing. And so understanding that when many of us are looking at some of the herbs we have in our garden, that it's not only for cooking, but that we are looking at what is happening to us and then using the specific food as medicine to help us alleviate our symptoms or our conditions. And then even using Hawaiian words like ho ikaika for exercise, right? We surfing, and many other things that we did in the past to help us exercise. Just highlighting a few, again, not an exhaustive list, but there's some really great things like United Healthcare and Aloha Care have added on. For Aloha Care, they've added their value these services, which include Aipono, Ho'oponopono, Hula, and Lomi Lomi, which they are providing access to for their population. United Healthcare will provide services for Lomi Lomi and La'au. And so it's just really amazing to see insurance companies that are stepping into this space and acknowledging how important it is and bringing it together with what they're doing. And so just very excited that this is coming about. And then we have a lot of our FQHCs, our Fairly Health Qualified Centers, are doing some amazing things, from Waimanalo to KKV to Waikiki Health and to Waianae Coast Comprehensive. They have a Hawaiian Healing Center. They also have a Kupuna Council there that oversees traditional healers and practitioners. But at Kokua, Kalihi Valley, and Waimanalo Health Center, these services are being offered. At Waimanalo Health Center, they do offer Lomi Lomi, La'au Lapau services by Mai Kumu. At KKV, we have Ho'ula Aina, and we're providing Lomi Lomi services. We have a lot of outreach to help with the Aina or the land there. We have an apothecary on site, and very much the practitioner or our Okumu there, Puni, working closely with a lot of the Western educated providers so that we can do a look at our patients' health in total and provide them the support on both ends. And Waikiki Health Center has some amazing programs that they're doing there, a lot of things based on Hawaiian values, Hawaiian culture, the language. And so it's nice to see the health centers taking that lead and really working together to provide these services to the populations that we're serving. And of course we are serving a diverse population, and so we are always looking at and open to all different cultures and their ways of practicing and understanding healthcare and medicine. And then if you're not familiar with Papakalea, because who's not, they are just like the star community when we're talking about how to bring services together. They amazingly all the time do such a great job, not just working in policy, but also bringing what is needed to their community. And they do that through so many ways. They bring culturally tailored, appropriate programs, but they also work together so efficiently to bring what their community needs to them. And so it's if you haven't ever heard about Papakalea or seen their programs, please go on their website. It is amazing what they are able to accomplish. And then for the health centers and our two insurance companies up here, policy, it took a while to change policy. And that's where all of this work comes in, is to change policy at the organizational level so that we can create effective change. So cultural competency and healthcare, this is from the Office of Minority Health. It's another great place to look for resources, but it's really looking at the respectful and responsive to health beliefs, practices, and needs of the diverse patients and improving the quality of services. It's really essential for healthcare providers for us to understand and respect the cultural background of our patients, but not only that, all of us based on our culture, and that doesn't always have to mean by ethnicity, but just our culture, where we live, our nationality, whatever culture, is to really understand yourself too and your own culture, because that's how a lot of times we make our decisions and we decide on what we're doing, and that's based on our own. And so understanding our own biases, understanding our own culture, how that affects our decision making, how that affects what we do, is very, very much important. Not to understand ourselves, not just another person's culture. You really have to understand yourself also. And this will be wonderful to improve communication, trust, and outcomes. So policy implications, getting more into the policy side, what can we do? You definitely can advocate, support, engage, foster partnerships, invest in relationships, and of course, develop evidence-based interventions. And evidence-based interventions is great, but we also can't dismiss the evidence based on centuries of, for instance, like our Kapuna, who came before us, and what they did, what they were able to do, and that all of the protocols weren't developed yet from Western culture, but we definitely have our evidence base also, and so that knowledge is getting passed down through our Kapuna. That should also be incorporated, acknowledged, and used also, and given the same respect as we do when we're developing our protocols. So we can advocate for policies that really promote equitable access to culturally competent care, support legislative efforts, and we'll talk about that in a little bit while, and really engage Native Hawaiian communities like Papakalea and many others. Partnerships are wonderful because they'll provide a lot of insight, they'll provide a lot of help, and can definitely get a lot of more work done that way. And really investing in research initiatives that are going to include the people that you're researching, and that also maybe the researchers look like the community that you're interested in researching. But also this comes a lot to it in Native Hawaiian communities, is there is from history a long-standing history of coming in, doing research, and then leaving, never returning. And so a lot of focus now is when Native Hawaiian communities are approached for research that may inform policy or just for healthcare or research purposes, that who owns this data, where is this data going, and I do apologize, where the data is going and what are they going to do with the data, who's going to have access to the data, is it coming back to us, are we going to be able to see it? And so those are a lot of things that we're struggling with and talking about in the community, and when we're approached to have research done in our spaces, because things need to change in sort of that sense of just not collecting information about us and then the information never gets back to us, and especially, like I already said, not having the data, or that it belongs to someone else when it belongs to us too. And so some of the examples of policy work, of course, we have Papa Ololokahi, who is majorly involved. They do convene the councils, Native Hawaiian Health Improvement Act, the master plan, all of that falls under Papa Ololokahi, who also is who also heads our Native Hawaiian health systems. They just had a convening, it's on their website, on their blog, of the Kupuna councils coming together and signing a declaration of practice, which was an amazing experience to see, and happy that came together. And then the Silver Alert, one of their Kia'i Lee, who is part of Papa Ololokahi, was part of our team with Alzheimer's Association and many others to get the Silver Alert passed. And I think this was our second or third time introducing it into legislation. And so that's also an example of us coming together. We definitely needed to have the Native Hawaiian spaces and organizations become part of it, and to join us and to bring together and to raise the voices. And so we were very happy that it passed, and we were just at the bill signing, was it last week? And so they have all of those pictures up on the website, and many others in the association. So it was really nice to come together. The Office of Hawaiian Affairs is another entity that really looks at Hawaiian policies here and in the nation. And their initiative is determining whether Hawaiians want to create a Native Hawaiian governing entity to represent themselves, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the sovereignty movement and many other political issues that are surrounding the Native Hawaiian community. Looking at a lot of their directions are education, the health outcomes, equality, housing, economic, and sustainability. The Center for Native Hawaiian Advancement, who Poki'i is doing so many amazing things across our state, looking at our right to self-determination, our Native Hawaiian population's right to self-determination, looking at housing, economic development, for the tribal regenerative tourism, cultural integrity, land and natural resources, and civic engagement, all issues surrounding the lohui, the populations that all of us are serving as providers, the population when we're creating policies. All of these things really need to be considered. While this focuses more on a little bit of the Native Hawaiian perspective, whether it's Native Hawaiian, another NHPI, an AAPI, or another culture anywhere, many of these same highlights come through. And so that was the picture I was saying, and talking about community engagement and collaboration. Together we can always do more than when we're alone. And so that is the picture of right after the bill signing, when we were together. Not everybody is in that picture, but many of the legislators joined us in our celebration, as well as board members from the Alzheimer's Association and others. And you'll see them highlighted throughout the presentation. And when I first got started in policy, it was really through the association was my first introduction into the policy and advocacy world. And then from that, the love just grew and grew and grew. So when you can, do community engagement and collaboration, you can really do these really health initiatives and community advisory, or have the community involved. And you can integrate the cultural values and community, improve the trust and cultural understanding, and have a shared decision making, that it's a collective whole, not one leading it or having more of a say than others, but that it's shared and really expressing and promoting equity between all of us. Some of the ethical considerations when looking at policy or dealing with other cultures is like informed consent, end of life care, respecting culture and beliefs, sensitivity in healthcare decisions, advanced healthcare directives, traditional healing practices. And it's really just understanding and knowing, like, for the end of life care, what are Native Hawaiian practices? What are their thoughts? What are their beliefs? Is it the same? Sometimes when we talk about in Alzheimer's, with certain people have hallucinations. Well, for some it's not acceptable, for others it is, depending on the culture. So how are we navigating that when we're speaking about it, when we're talking about it, understanding our own bias and our own culture and our own views, but being respectful of others? Advanced health directives, ikuana'u, which we were part of, looking at how do we have those discussions so that we can increase our ability to complete advanced healthcare directives within the Native Hawaiian community. We came together and formed to see how can we do this. Where is it from the Native Hawaiian perspective that we need to discuss, we need to come at, so that we can get the information to them, we can start the conversations, we can have that understanding, we can learn, and we can also share why this is important, and then how can we come together to help them understand the importance of it, why it's needed, and why it should be completed. And it was a great group that came together, and I love the videos that came out of it, and successful. And for healthcare decisions, understanding dynamics, the culture, who is the one in charge of making those decisions, who will be in charge, understanding the thought process, behind it. And so those are great conversations to have. Very hard to do if you have a 15-minute block, and sometimes may need to set aside time to go a little further. And these are a lot of the ethical considerations and things that we are talking about when we're writing policy and creating policy, is trying to understand all these different perspectives, beliefs, all these fundamental differences, so that we can make sure that we're inclusive, and especially that long, exhaustive list of aging policies. So for healthcare affiliates, of course, having cultural competence training programs is wonderful. If we're looking at Native Hawaiian cultural values and practices, we can focus on the understanding, having partnerships with the Native Hawaiian community, persons, individual, organizations, however you may have it, your friends, your family, that are having those discussions, those talks, looking for online courses. We're so busy nowadays where it's really hard to go in person, although in person is just wonderful. But if you can access any online courses and workshops and utilize case studies and best practices, volunteer. That's a great way, is to volunteer for organizations, or to just be part of sometimes their committees, and to ask questions. Sometimes people feel that it might not pay to ask, so ask the questions. I ask plenty of questions when I'm in clinic to my patients and my colleagues, so that I can understand. And I think it helps them see that we're trying to understand too, and we're trying to figure it out with them. So one of the places I'm affiliated with is the Center for Health Policy at Columbia University, at the nursing school. And it's been a great journey, because a lot of their focus is to training nurses in health policy research methods, but also how to disseminate the knowledge, how what they're doing is going to inform policymakers, how to be involved in policy at the local, state, and national levels, and really preparing students to have that awareness. They might not all go into policy, they may not ever do anything again with policy, but to have that awareness of what they're doing and how that specifically can connect to policy, how they can get engaged in policy efforts, or how they can use what they're doing in their everyday or in their research, and how they can use that to change, create, modify, or be involved in the policy spaces. And so it's been great to be a part of that initiative. And some of the and providing some of the perspectives for them to understand and to see also. And I'll just share a real little bit about me, like how did I get into aging spaces, because of course I went into medicine and wasn't expecting to veer off to this route. And really it came from my lived experience, came from being with my father and becoming a caregiver. I don't think I would have if I didn't become a caregiver. Trying to access resources, understanding the policies and the whys and the why not, how to access it. And it was such a frustrating experience because caregiving, gosh, when my father was diagnosed, there wasn't all this buzz about Alzheimer's. We didn't have all this NIH funding. We didn't have all of this going towards all the medication that has come out. Uh, and so it was difficult to be a caregiver. And there wasn't a lot of programs available, or resources going towards it, legislation and organizations focusing on it. And so that was what I wanted to do, was I wanted to change that. I wanted to be part of changing that so that other caregivers coming behind me wouldn't have to deal with the same things that I dealt with and have such a difficult journey. And that is part of aging, and that's part of us, of the entire continuum. And so my experiences have I've been fortunate to have many experiences, and to be a leader, to be part of communities, to be a haumana, to be a provider, and taking all of that and seeing how can I help to change things and make things better for what's to come. And of course, I have been with Alzheimer's Association. I think Ivy and I just made our 10 years. So it's really been a privilege to help on that front to change policy here at the state and at the national level. And here, this is some of the pictures, of course, meeting with the mayor, our governor, and on the other side is some of the members of PABIA, our policy advisory. And here specifically in Hawaii, we've worked on the CDC bold grant, right? Hawaii was a recipient. We are in phase 2. We do have committees. If anybody wants to be part of it, please let me know. My email will be at the end of the slide. We are part of the Healthy Brain Initiative that came from CDC, creating the first ever Native Hawaiian dementia roadmap. So I'm part of that implementation team. And that very much is focusing on cultural differences, culturally tailored care. I've quite a few policy committees here in the state. The newly convened long-term care continuum task force that has been put together to really look at our direction of aging in the state of Hawaii, and pulling on what was set up first, our foundation that was set back in, I think, the 80s when they were first starting to take a look at it. The dementia state coordinator position has been filled, the Kupuna caregiver program, and looking at Kupuna advisory councils around the state and within different organizations. And so culture, as you can see, can play a role, or understanding culture in many different spaces. When we're looking at the CDC bold grant, or the Hawaii Disease Dementia Initiative, HDI as it is referred to now, there are many of us, and coming from many different perspectives, from different ages to different cultures to different organizations with vast experience, all between us, all coming together to see if we can change the trajectory or improve the quality of life for those in our state living with the disease, and the caregivers, and of course our entire community that it affects. Some of our at the national level, and of course I use most of the pictures from the Alzheimer's Association, but it's always a great way looking at policy initiatives. We're still looking at the BOLD Act, the reauthorization for that, the NAPA, the National Alzheimer's Project Act, and we worked on many other legislative efforts at the Capitol. This specifically looking at Alzheimer's and the constituents that are affected by it. The Alzheimer's Association did have a long, challenging struggle when looking at CMS, or we're supporters of CMS, providing support for Leqembi and many other initiatives and medications that were coming out of CMS. And so while, like I was saying, some of these are not, maybe in terms of how people may think Native Hawaiian specific, it is, because all of these are affecting everybody who lives in the state or at the national level. And so all of us who are different cultures are part of this and have access to it. And so all of our voices need to be heard. All of our perspectives need to be heard. All of us who have that need to come to the table and share what is important to us, so that all of these policies can be all inclusive. And that is really how cultural competency plays into policy initiatives, is to make sure that it's equitable and it's inclusive of everyone that we're serving when we're creating these changes that are going to happen, especially at a very macro level. And here are some of the policy committees that I am a part of. These are more with the state, and then one in health policy. And there's also national organizations. So the Kupuna Caucus, of course, the association, PAPA, SHPTA, I sit on their advisory board for Kupuna Advisory Council. Columbia University Center for Health Policy, the Alzheimer's Association, their committees to roll out their new strategic plan, Poki'i, and many others. And so it's really great to work together with all of my colleagues to make sure that we're pooling policy that's going to meet the needs of the people that we are trying to serve. This was, as Dr. Masaki referred to, the Obama Foundation Scholars Program. The reason why I put it in here, while it was an amazing program and a lot of kuleana, I felt as being the first from Hawaii to represent Hawaii and of course the United States, along with my colleagues, there's all of us are from different countries, was the ability to be able to work on policy through the program, looking at aging initiatives and policy, not from a state or national view, but from a global view, and seeing how aging policy, how we are so connected, and also issues that are happening around the world, right? The World Health Organization has declared this the decade of aging, and the United Nations has a lot of work that is going into aging policies. And so it was an amazing experience to not only draft policy memos, but also to see this really broad perspective of how aging is affecting the entire world, and the similarities, the differences, the challenges, the successes, and how we can leverage each other and what has happened. Everything ends with a call to action. And while this specifically looking at aging policies is, I put that picture just to say, it's because what is your why? How does it start? Well, for me, it started for my dad, for my father, for those that were around me, my community. And that was how I got into policy, was I wanted to change things after what I experienced with my father, and I wanted to change things for him. It's too late for him to get Laquembi and anything else, but that doesn't mean that my efforts stop. I'm going to keep going so that things can be better for the person who comes next. So really, it's to integrate this cultural competence training into all curriculums and to collaborate with communities, Native Hawaiian community and others. And so I think I just made it 45 minutes. I made it to the time. So please, cultural competence is essential for improving healthcare outcomes on all levels. And there is my my email if anybody wants to get in touch with me. So thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much for this really nice and inspiring presentation. Does anybody have any questions? We have a small enough group that please unmute yourself and ask your questions. Any comments, any questions?
Hey, Poki'i, I just want to say thank you. I am speechless about, your thoughtfulness and how you've approached the whole thing, and just being at the table is just so important, and just being there, I think, puts you in a position to advocate. And I just want to encourage everybody to do that. I mean, I think that's why a lot of us go into geriatrics and go into medicine. But yeah, I really appreciate your presence at a lot of these tables.
Thank
I see
you.
a question from Jeanette Koijane of Kakuamau. Can you discuss the difference between cultural competence and cultural humility?
Jeanette, I feel like you would be the perfect person to discuss that. You want to jump on?
No, of course I want you to know, you just to tell it all. Hold on a minute. I'm eating my poi, Poki'i. That's oh, really. No, I think I was wondering as you were talking about cultural competence that it sounded like it was systematic from like a government agency, which seems like a good place to talk about it. And then also in my life, the cultural humility, I think, is just so crucial, especially, those of us in Hawaii, we we know this, like we ask questions. It's how we, you go to a potluck and say, oh, what's this? Oh, it's my Okinawan grandmother's whatever. And then you can talk about all kinds of things. So in healthcare, we do the same thing. So I find the concept of cultural humility so important. I mean, how could we possibly know all of the different, richness of our community? So that's why I was wondering, is cultural competence, is that defined someplace? So that was my question.
Yes, I agree with you. I think it's not only the same, but that it comes together. So right, a lot of the buzzwords is around cultural competency, making sure you understand, you get this training, you know what's happening. But the humility or kind of in a sense understanding our own bias and our own culture to right, recognize like what are my limitations and that I shouldn't make assumptions about other cultures. And that happens quite frequently still yet here in Hawaii, even though we're very much uh, surrounded. And what was interesting to me too is like when I'm on the East Coast, I thought that Hawaii, right, would be better at cultural competence and cultural humility and understanding our own bias, and we're great at it. But I was also really excited to see that it's very much present all the way on the other side, in the East Coast too, at least in a lot of the organizations I work with. And I didn't bring up, and if that's what people would like to go over, if you want to look at a specific policy that we've drafted, like the Silver Alert that was just passed, or the Puna Caregiver Program, or national policies, or even if the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Act, if you want me to bring that up and we can dive in how cultural competence and cultural humility played a role in convening those, the Hawaiian Commission Act, and going through that and really and connecting the dots. I'd be happy to do that too in our last 9 minutes. But especially even when I'm in DC and New York, it was just very apparent to me how people are aware of cultural competency and cultural humility when they're drafting policy, and that it is not coming from a place of like, we're just going to make this and this is what we're going to do and this is how it's going to work the best. That how many people take the time to go out and try to speak and seek as many people as they can, to learn as much as they can, and to discuss where they feel maybe they're lacking, and what they have learned to be able to create the program. So like when I'm in New York, it was interesting to me. Like I did almost a similar presentation for the Center for Health Policy and Indigenous Perspectives, or looking at Native Hawaiian perspectives, and how since we have a pretty large population of Native Hawaiians in New York City, but how not everybody knew about it or knew our history or involved. And when we were looking at aging policy, I went to a few classes at Columbia to discuss cultural relevance and how our perspectives can influence policy. And so it was very welcoming, though. They were very, very interested and wanted to learn more about it. And a lot of them began to talk about what you're saying, like their own bias, their own limitations, what they thought they knew, and how and being in part of the policy classes, like just listening to them as they were pulling this all together, it was something amazing to see, and really gave me hope to see that policy can make these incredible changes when we have so many coming together like that.
Yeah, and I'm as a policy wonk too. I think, oh, how does one, because cultural issues can be so huge, but I'm so pleased to hear that that's like something that can be included in policy. So thank you. That's it's and I'm also interested in what's next and what other issues. So I did just want to say I would encourage people to use the cultural humility as well as cultural competence, because that takes people aback, and and of course we worry people take a class and now they're culturally competent. Oops. So anyway, I'm interested in what other things you're working on, or what you see as our biggest chances right now.
Oh, right now there's a lot of work going together. That's a big one. So I can give a few. I don't think these are, I wouldn't say the most important or pressing. I think that always depends on your area or what you're interested or loved in. But a lot of my work right now is looking at, like, I drafted a policy memo for caregiver financial health. So looking at how at the national, the state, and working with different organizations, policy can be changed to continue the viability of caregivers. So together with Alzheimer's Association in August, we're hosting, I think we're still going to do a luncheon for employers to come to understand how they can best utilize caregivers, as well as how employers can make effective policy within their own organizations to support caregivers and make sure to increase their financial viability. The state level, like the long-term care task force you're part of, will be talking about it in some of those committees. And then at the national level, there are being introduced. Places like Washington have already created their own long-term care fund, and so that's one huge part that definitely working on at many different levels. And then in terms of, like, for Native Hawaiian traditional practices, still working at that for recognized, right, part of the Native Hawaiian Health Care Act and Papalolokahi convening the Kupuna Councils is our traditional healers who are recognized by the Kupuna Councils and who are practicing. And there is still, of course, that tangle between, right, like how all of us Western medicine, we get our licenses and board certified and at the state, and how does that transfer over to our traditional healers, which was why everybody go look at Papalolokahi, the declaration that was just signed, the convening of all of the traditional healers, and many of us who were there to support the efforts were pulled together as we continue to talk about the lifeline of our Lahui and how we're going to support them and work together with our Western, counterparts to improve the life. So that's a huge policy, and another, work in progress is looking at our own, traditional healers and what does that mean for here in the state for practicing efforts. And so those were some things, and then other things at the national level for aging is there's a lot with CMS right now, and a lot of other things we're looking at, even at the long-term care. One of the things we're working on in the East Coast, because it is looking at the new models for long-term care. We don't have a model here in Hawaii, and many states are looking at phasing out, the 4 beds, the 3 beds, and creating policy so that private rooms or shared spaces with 2 or less are going to become will be the policy. So they're really looking at how are they going to phase out in long-term care facilities these multiple beds, which of course are not the best for the people who live in there. And so it's on the East Coast, it's definitely a big thing that's happening, and a lot of states are changing their policy.
Pedro, I noticed you had your hand up.
Oh, yes. Thank you for the presentation, Poki'i. And also kind of a follow-up question on this, but when you're thinking about developing policy and implementing policy, do you and other policymakers, I guess, consider to incorporate ways to kind of measure how effective policy is and kind of measure, unintended consequences, and like put in place mechanisms to see if the policy, if it's not kind of what it turned out to be, like mechanisms to change it kind of on the quicker side? Because I know like policy takes a long time to pass, right?
Yes, it does, especially the higher you are, the longer it can take to pass. So before I get to answering your question, so like, working on caregiver financial viability, that's going to be a lot easier to work with individual organizations than the state, than the national level. So what can we do right away to help improve those things? Because a lot of times when people hear policy, they think state and national. It doesn't always have to be state and national. We can do a lot of things in other spaces. But yes, when we're looking at policy, unintended consequences always come up. We definitely very much try to look ahead to see, what can we foresee that could happen, possibly happen, which is a lot about gathering voices and perspectives and expertise from, it depends what we're working on, communities or subject matter experts or et cetera, et cetera. And policy can be changed, as we all know. How long will it take to change the policy? That can depend on what policy we're changing, at what level, and what are we changing in the policy. Are we trying to change the entire policy, just one part of it? do we need to make an an addendum? Do we need to just, is there something that we're missing? Do we need to expand it more? Did we just not get this right? And so a lot of those questions, it depends on what we're trying to change. And then to your other, I think your other question was, do we try to put safeguards in there? We definitely try to. And most things, like many of us know who work, right, who are in city and county, state, or when you receive grants, you're always having to turn in information. So sometimes the legislation does ask for, annual reports or for things to be sent back to them. So those are put into policy if it's decided that they are expecting reports back, or if it's a policy being created that is asking for that to help determine, the next year for like funding, or if they're going to continue the program. So yes, it's all considered, it's all put in, but of course every policy is different. It all depends on what the policy aim is and what it's trying to do.
Okay, thank you again. Audience, thank you for your wonderful questions and discussion. It was very rich. Thank you, Poki'i. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise, and we'll certainly invite you back again another time.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Everyone, don't forget to get your CME credits. You have to complete the evaluation, and the link is in the chat. Thank you, John, for putting it in there. Okay, bye, everyone. See you next month.